possibly, but it shows kind of where when we went off and our society went off and changed. Sometimes that turns out to be for the worst, and this is kind of where it seems to be. We're going from Leave It to Beaver back during when my parents were kids to watching shows like The Walking Dead on TV now.
And, one of the biggest things we heard as a kid, and even nowadays, is video games and TV affects a kid's behavior or people's behavior in general. Do you actually feel that's the case, or do you feel that it's a little far-fetched or overblown of that TV, video games, and all this actually affect who we are?
It would be foolish to go off and say that we're not affected by what we go off and what we see and what we do.
Well, no, there's a difference between being affected to the point, especially more emotionally and things like that. But I find it hard to believe that playing violent video games or watching violent TV will make people actually go out and do such acts for themselves.
Unfortunately, there is material out there. I can't go off. I wish I actually would have known that we were going to talk about this. I could have brought up.
We never know what we're talking about until we do.
Yeah, exactly. We may even remember I've used this line a couple of times. On Polomania when I was writing one of the shows for him. This is we make this shit up as we go along. That is an exact quote. You can go off. You can go on Polomania's pro board and you can confirm that for the universe if you'd like. But yeah, I mean, what was that? I was just going off. I was reading something about some of the scariest things that people have done because of video games or as part of video games. And there was actually a couple of cases where there was a demonic figure that was in a particular video game, and they had taken it from actual mythology. And that some children actually had become so obsessed with them and wanting to make this particular figure happy. A couple of girls went off and stabbed one of their classmates repeatedly with a knife, and another child tried to burn down their house with their mother and little brother in it.
I believe what you're talking about is Slender Man.
Slender Man, thank you.
And yes, I agree. But at the same point, I do question if maybe the biggest reason for it isn't so much generally the video games or the TV stuff itself. It's our personality itself. You get so immune to watching stuff like this that it doesn't seem to affect you anymore. And that's a big issue. It's not generally just the TV show or whatever you're doing. It's you yourself that actually causes this mentality to adapt to what you're watching or adapt to what you're playing and kind of form it into your own life.
Oh, absolutely. You go off, you take a person that has never watched a horror movie and then have them go off and watch, The Walking Dead, and then and they will have a completely different reaction than someone like yourself or my friend Sweet Daddy D, who've been horror fans since you guys were little kids.
Absolutely,
I mean, because you go off and you become accustomed, you become tainted. I don't want to say tainted, but you become accustomed to it. It becomes part of you. And you do, I mean, absolutely, you are, this stuff does affect you because it becomes part of you. Now, depending on, your personality, as you point out, or the psyche that you have, yeah, it's going to be different. But, I mean, all this stuff is going to go off and is going to affect people differently, but it's still going to end up affecting you. And that's why, it goes off and, it goes off in, I'll take it from the Bible, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So, going from that is, whatever you put in your brain is what is going to come out.
Absolutely.
One way or another.
I do want to read a little bit about what Weem wrote. He's definitely been a big inspiration to our show tonight, kind of helping this go along a little bit, which is good.
Which is great, guys, absolutely. Always free, go off, sign up for Spreaker, and you go off, and you can comment on the shows. We love to read your comments. And, I mean, that's part of the reason why we love Weem, when he comes on here, with us, because he really interacts a lot with us, and, it adds to the show.
Yeah, so definitely I'll start with Weems, and I will answer another question that was asked previously. So his is, I honestly think it's a general hardening of people's hearts. TV and video games did or do desensitize children somewhat, sadly, because they become easy babysitters because parents didn't spend time with them. Kids are blank slip pages, and their story reflects what we write on them, good or bad. I completely agree with that. The other thing I want to touch on is another question. Game of Thrones, yes, is another one that's a little bit more violent, but at the same point, Game of Thrones follows a different storyline. With The Walking Dead, it's more of a fantasy what if. With Game of Thrones, it's more
a bit of a fantasy what if. It's
but
just
at the same
different
point,
type of fantasy.
It's the same point. It's stuff that have already happened in our history. Just retold in a different format. Especially the barbarians, the raiding of the villages, the public executions.
This is stuff that definitely have happened over, and then you have events like the infamous Red Wedding.
Yeah, so they take key moments in our history and they kind of add to it in a definitely a more violent way. But at the same point, you kind of get the feeling that things like this actually could have happened in these times, which is kind of scary. When you really look at it. And yes, you did hear a slow clap.
Yes,
you had pretty much the comment that wins the world today.
You absolutely did. I went off. I was applauding you, my dear sir. Absolutely.
We couldn't have said it better ourselves.
No, absolutely not. That was kind of the point I was trying to get across. But we went off and said it so much more eloquently than I obviously can.
I was going to paraphrase, but I realized that it would miss the glory and the beauty, and I had to read it word for word. So thank you, Weem. Yeah. You are awesome. I will not slow clap because
you're holding onto the phone that we're actually using to do the podcast.
Yes, and if I slow clap with the phone, it would sound really weird, and we won't go there. Okay. But we will start kind of narrowing down our show.
So I wish we could go off and say that we have a solution for all you for this, but sadly, this seems to be...
there is a bit of a solution. You kind of mix your horror movies and your horror TV shows a lot with comedy is what I do. I've started watching a TV show again called Z Nation, which is a little bit of a zombie/comedy show altogether. It's really unique, especially when you kind of put in the fact that it's made by the same company who did Sharknado.
Yeah, let's not even go there.
So we do eventually at one point see a zombie NATO, which was the most humorous, entertaining thing I've ever seen, even though I groaned when I first saw it. When I watched it again, it was entertaining.
You had to know that somewhere along the line, if they're going to come up with, if some idiot came up with the idea, why don't we go off and we have a tornado that sucks up a bunch of sharks? But somewhere along the line, someone would have said, hey, that's a great idea. Why don't we do it with zombies instead?
Yeah, and that's the best thing. You look at Shaun of the Dead and things like that. You're mixing the horror and the gore with the comedy, and that's what our world needs. Yes.
Or you can do just as I do and stay away from horror as much as you can.
That's impossible. You need that.
Or some of you, yes.
You need that mix, and there's so much variety out there. Ash versus the Evil Dead was brought up. Definitely a little bit more of a comedic Rust level.
Oh, I love I love it. The Army of Darkness with Ash is by far one of my favorite movies.
It's the awesome things, and there's certain shows that really kind of affect me a bit more. The Exorcist was definitely one of them. The Conjuring was another one that was very unique, and I enjoyed watching that one on a different, more level. I've always been fascinated with possession of inanimate objects like dolls or things like that. I think it's a unique idea that may or may not actually exist.
Yes. Okay.
So yeah, and then you got like things like Ouija and things that are definitely on a more spooky level that don't need a movie. They're spooky enough on their own.
Ouija boards are definitely weird. interesting story I'll quickly bring up. My dad's oldest brother, or older brother, because since my dad's the second oldest, allegedly, he had an Ouija board when he was younger, and it actually told him to throw it out. So that kind of tells you, something interesting.
Yes. And I dabbled with the Ouija board a bit myself when I was a kid. Definitely the scariest thing I've ever dealt with, and
as someone who grew up in a Christian home, all I have to tell you is there's just some stuff you don't mess around with.
I'm actually unable to touch or look at a Ouija board, now because of things I've gone through because of it. And so definitely that's one of those things.
Messing around with the supernatural is not a very good idea. And let's just leave it at that.
Before we end the show, I definitely have to bring up one more comedy / horror movie, which is The Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse. I cannot bring up comedy / horror movies without bringing up the most stupidest, pointless, awesome comedy, horror, joining together, other than Zombieland. And that's only because I like Twinkies.
Yeah, there's definitely some resemblance between you and Woody Harrelson from that movie.
Absolutely. I will fight anyone for a Twinkie, and if you steal my Twinkie, I will chop your tongue off. Apparently we want to hear more about our wall of poutine. It's empty poutine containers because us Canadians eat them all. It's also, I also have to say,
if you guys down south don't know what poutine is, effectively it is, French fries with gravy.
It's a heart attack in a bowl.
French fries with gravy and cheese curds.
Yes. I also have to point out to you Americans listening, if you are of the few who want to move to Canada, I can instruct you in the ways to survive up here. For an easy $50,000, I can give you a guide.
American, by the way, not Canadian.
I can give you a guide how to survive a Canadian winter, how to find your first pet moose, and how to build an igloo. And what Canadian food is.
And with that, it's time for us to finish up with the show. Thanks once again, guys, for listening. As we go off, and we talked about Joey Styles and about how how horror has seemed to went off and start to truly mess with society. It's a
real thing, folks.
It's a real thing. Yes, it is. You can follow us on Twitter.
You can follow me at real CAPT so at real Captain Fizz.
Yes, bravo, sir, bravo.
Wow. I was reading Weem's comments as I was talking, and I got distracted, and I forgot where I was and what I was doing.
Well, that's what you should read it afterwards. You can follow me, of course, at That Mask Guy. Follow the show at Fizz Mask Show. Go to our website, www.fizzmaskshow.com.
.com.
We haven't updated it for a while, as frequent listeners probably know by now, but there is the first 53 episodes of the show on there. There's also links to all 3 Twitter accounts, which we have referenced, plus a link to our Facebook page. And if you're on Facebook, simply look up Captain Fizz and the Masked Man.
Yes. And Weem, I will not sublet a sofa. I will rent it out to you on general hotel policy costs at $30 a night.
And Weem, all I'm going to say is, sorry, bro, you guys went off and you made your bed, now you're going to have to lay in it. So happy you have a nice 4 years.
While you're laying in your bed, I'm laying on my comfy couch.
So, guys, thanks once again, and in the meantime, and in between time, good night, God bless, and may the Force be with you.
And as always, stay frosty, my people. Good night.